Thanks for inviting us. Thanks for AndPurpose to basically curate some of the sessions which are very relevant and meaningful, which actually stands with the name AndPurpose. So just to begin with, I mean, just imagine, you know, India, we're a vast country. We've got about 140, crores of population, which stands for almost 18% of the global population. Similarly, we have, about 30 odd states. Each of the state would stand for almost equal to or bigger than the countries in the Europe or maybe in Americas itself. Now, looking at the diversity itself, there is huge diversity. We have the have-nots, the millionaires and the billionaires of the world, and we have upcoming bourgeois or not so no have-nots, which basically struggle for their daily livelihoods or survival itself. Now, also look at the fact that over a period of time, international aid has been there, which supported us. It's been long period. Lots of NGOs, just to see, we've got about 3.3 million registered charities in India. The number is debatable, but by far it's more than, I would say, double of the closest second, which is the US, which has got about 1.5 million. Now, I think if we also look at CSR, which has emerged over a period of time, specifically over a decade, and it is playing a prominent role, where it's kind of catalyzed a lot of transformation. Look at impact financing, which has also been the game changer over a period of time. We all had, from water credits to carbon impact and other such things. So which is basically also transforming the country itself as a whole. I've put out some data for you all as well before I get into the introduction with my panelist. The data basically is around the CSR. I mean, if we look at over the last 10 years or 11 years of its existence, it's got about 1.6 lakh crore of rupee invested in India alone itself on CSR itself. We look at different thematic areas. I mean, before I go into that, last year it's been 30,000 crores, which has been a huge amount of investment. We look at the thematic areas, about 3 or 4 thematic areas, which are the top ones, consume about 60 to 70% of the total outlay. Similarly, we look at top 5 states out of the 30 states, which would consume more than 50% of this outlay. It's growing definitely, but there are challenges with this. Now look at international aid. International aid, we all know about USAID, everybody is talking about what happened to that. America really made a cut of about $60 billion, which is huge in that sense. UK government has announced a cut of about $6 billion pounds, which is again huge by far. They've diversified it back to the defense. Similarly, look at Germany. Germany has cut about 600 million. Similarly, if you look at Canada, 1.3 billion, and European Union has cut about 2 billion. So I think international aid is completely going to a different priority area itself. No more what probably we used to look for this. So in this gamut, investment of impact financing has really emerged as a big thing, from 2,700 crore to about 90,000 crores in a span of 11-12 years is a humongous jump for this. And this itself is basically accounting for a lot of stuff which could be transformative. It is, as we say in our olden times, money makes the mayor go. The transformation or the charity has to begin from home, and that only is possible if, investment is made in such meaningful ways. Now, before I get into, further conversations, let me introduce my panelists itself, where I can talk about a little bit about themselves rather than they talking about themselves. Let me read it out for them, and then I'll get into the conversation, with them itself. So on my right is Shiv Shankar. He's a partner with Ankur Capital, a venture capitalist company. He's a finance and impact investment expert specializing in ESG driven financial solutions. He has got a background in banking and sustainability, and he focuses on climate finance, responsible investing, and leveraging capital for meaningful change. Shiva, welcome. In the middle is Shubhadeep Sanyal. He's a partner with Omnivore Venture Capital. He's a seasoned investor in agribusiness and impact-driven finance. With deep expertise in venture capital, he supports the startup innovations in agriculture, climate resilience, and rural development. He bridges finance and sustainability, identifying high potential ventures, and that drives scalable social and environmental impact. Welcome, Shubhadeep. Last but not the least is Baiju Kurian. He's the CSR head of Bisleri Water. When I was talking with him, he told me that my name would suggest that where I am from. So that of course it does. So so Baiju is basically he specializes in CSR strategy, stakeholder engagement, impact assessment, ensuring corporate initiatives create a lasting and lasting social change. His expertise lies in designing scalable programs that go beyond compliance, fostering sustainable solutions for communities. And last, I'm your host, Vikas. I do work with basically an organization which works on water. I work with an organization called WaterAid India. We've got our presence in about 30 plus countries, and India is one of the biggest impact area we have. I'm basically from the banking background, and I switched over to social impact about 11 years ago. So let me kind of open up the session for you, and I can promise you that I won't hold you longer. I wouldn't hold you from your samosas and chai, whatever it comes to. We promise to finish it on time. I might act as a bad cop in between to put up the timings, but nonetheless, let me start with each one of you to basically give us, a little bit of introduction about yourself and what you see as CSR and impact financing from your point of view playing a role for India's development. I'll start with you, Shiva. I think in the order maybe we can follow that.
Sure, Vikas. Hi everyone, I'll just do a brief of my background. Ankur Capital though is a tech VC fund. We invest across a range of sectors that are creating impact while delivering strong financial returns that a tech VC typically looks at. My own background, before I started off with Ankur, I spent 5 years with another impact finance organization doing a version of blended finance early in my career. Spent a couple of years in the renewable energy space when the price of solar was still on a non-linear decrease and was supported by capital that was allowed us to move the model earlier than it could have been built out based on where solar pricing was going. And now, obviously, with the technology VC fund. For me, I've seen versions of the support that impact finance has been able to play if you're using it in a fairly targeted manner to say, okay, here's where I think cost structures are going to go, and ride that curve to create industries before they're fully ready, to create that infrastructure so that once technology is at a certain proof point, you can get it to scale in a considerably faster way. That's not always how it ends up getting leveraged, but we can talk through it in more detail, but that's just some of the areas I've seen success with in these pockets in the past. So I'll just quickly pause there.
All right, thank you. Hi, Shubhadeep here. As you already mentioned, so I represent Omnivore. Omnivore is an early stage venture capital fund investing in 3 areas: agri-food, climate, and rural innovations. My personal background is in an agribusiness guy by training, and then been with Omnivore for the last 14 years. So this is kind of all I understand and do. So over to you,
Hi everyone. I'm Baiju Kurian from Bisleri. I am not only water, I am taking care of all kind of all 3 major CSR programs of Bisleri. So in Bisleri we do 2 major programs, and we are going to discuss about that. So about that, to the context, when the CSR world started working in the developmental sector, there are a lot of things changed from charity to sustainability. When where there is a giving now stopped as a empowerment. Now CSR already included a lot of tech-savvy platforms, innovations, new digital health. A lot of education is also changed a lot. So CSR contributed a lot in the development sector. I am coming from the background of 20 years of a development sector experience, so I can clearly see that how it's developed. And nowadays, each corner, even the chaiwala knows about Paytm and how he can handle the ATM and bank management. So there is a lot of improvements that is came to the development sector and weaker sections. So I think the next questions will help us to reveal each one of the aspects of this development. Can continue, sir.
Thank you, Bharti, and thanks for the correction as well. Of course, you cover all the sorts of CSR with Bisleri. Thanks. I think let's start rolling with the questions now, and I think probably let's make the best use of the experts who are sitting here, and so that we all can take away something once we finish the session. I also want to prompt the audience as well, because I'm going to ask. If you're not going to ask questions, I'm going to ask questions to you as well. So better be prepared and have some questions ready. I will have some dedicated space at least for 10 minutes for you also to ask questions. All right, so let me move to Shiva. Shiva, we've all been talking about impact financing, blended finance, and impact bonds and so on. It sounds very technical and very glamorous word. Would you like to decode and talk about what's the landscape of impact financing in India, so we could basically, find out pathways on this?
Sure. It gets very complicated because for the reason you called out. There's all these terminology for every single version of it. The way I visualize it and explain it to people typically is there's three sources of capital that are there. There's equity, where you're expecting and participating in some sort of upside. There's debt, where you're saying here's some sort of structured repayment. And there's grants, which you're saying I'm most likely not going to ask for a version of it. Most sorts of impact finance as well are anchored in one of these three, altering versions in terms of that. And it's best when you're starting to look at this, like what is the closest anchor. So when you're thinking about social impact bonds, like called bonds, which are implying it's debt, but you're basically saying it's a redeemable grant in case you meet targets and we actually have to pay it back, someone else will cover the fees. So there's a close proxy to that. There's other versions of impact finance. You're saying there's debt required to set up a completely new sort of manufacturing facility, which we think will change the cost structure of technology. Great, important thing to do, creates a lot of impact. But we do longer tenure debt than is a traditional debt. A lot of the Norvolt type of European battery companies we've seen needed probably greater portions of that, saying just move out maturity so you get time to build out some parts in these things. Is available, but definitely an area that is in pockets, and more of that being available will be powerful. And the third is then saying, how do you get programs that are actually just trying to trigger creation of ecosystem? I haven't really seen a version of equity edits in this, to be honest, from the three anchors I called out, because the way you would edit equity is saying I change differential price or I take a smaller upside, which I just haven't seen in the ecosystem practically play out. In some ways, the firm I was with a long time ago tried doing a version of that, but it makes it very cumbersome from a implementation side. So the closest thing you've seen as the last tool is actually the government putting in the hat, and it's a FAME subsidies is a version of this. We think EV ecosystem should be built out. We think two-wheeler EV ecosystem can be built out. But to build that out, because we think this technology can work, we have to push capital in to create this ecosystem, and it's a grant. So the anchor there again isn't on an equity side, it's on the grant side saying we'll create the ecosystem and it'll do some good for the overall economy. So generally, impact finance will anchor on one of these three, and most likely the debt or the equity, debt or the grant. So without getting into what were the nomenclature for each of these, it's just mentally easier to frame it on saying it's probably an edit of one of these two, and how does that affect commercial viability of those products.
Would you also like to add that what sort of funding overall on the whole impact financing basically is attracting to India, and then?
Yeah, so the impact finance category overall, to the numbers you called out earlier, because I think they get skewed by including a lot of the equity finance we're getting in on growth capital, saying these are including investors like both of us, are coming in with a lens of saying, here's the impact we can create in sectors that haven't attracted capital, agriculture, climate, what can be created in these ecosystems. And a lot of the capital that is coming in to solve these problems, but with still a commercial equity lens, so I will speak from both of our sides, it is going into that number as well, and it's important to create that value chain. But that is where the benchmark and the lens is there. You're just saying, I'm focusing on these very overlooked segments, and it's in some ways not even editing terms to my earlier comment against how it gets looked in. You're just looking very focusedly at this one segment that otherwise wouldn't really see that pool of capital.
Well, thank you, Shiva. Let me turn to Shubhadeep now. Shubhadeep, I'm just carrying forward the discussion here. agri-innovation is quite a bit, which is on the rise now at this point in time. Uh, what are the biggest gaps you see that, that are still need to be addressed, particularly in Indian rural economy? And when we have India shining on one hand and Bharat on the other hand, how does these two things talk to each other, and where do you see it, playing a role?
No, super interesting. So I think, see, the thing with rural innovation or agri innovation is that it requires a longer tenure to, as an investor, it will require longer tenure, longer patience. Whether you're an early stage investor, whether you're a late stage investor, because the underlying principle does not change very fast. You are dependent on the season, right? At the end of the day. Um, so the one thing that we have learned over the last 13, 14 years is that you need to come into things at the right time and you have to wait out, right? Now I'll further maybe contextualize that. So when you're talking about products, essentially new innovative products, IoT products which were not there to monitor soil health and water and all of that, which is now available. There's still affordability which needs to be bridged, but it's available. So there is a gestation period for hardware typically, right? Whether it's smallholder robotics, whether it's IoT, whether it's satellite, whatever you may want, advanced machinery and stuff like that. So there is a 3 to 5 year product development period which is required, and that's where I think a lot of the early stage ecosystem has evolved over the years. BIRAC has done a wonderful job in terms of, DBT has done a wonderful job in terms of creating that ecosystem for biotechnology driven companies. If you're creating a new molecule which is replacing an agrochemical maybe tomorrow, so you need that lab access as a young startup, right? So all of those grants that early stage ecosystem is now built. What is kind of lacking further, I think, is that, and in terms of, as particularly in terms of the open areas where more money can flow in, I think we have just about started to look at, if you look at most of the investments done, right, as Shiva rightly pointed out, so a lot of it has actually gone into disintermediation of the agri value chains. That's largely where the majority of the money has gone in over the last 6, 7, 8 years, till, since agri-tech became a thing. If I have to carve out the hardcore agri innovation, the product innovation part, that will hardly be like 15-20%, right, of the capital gone, maybe not even that much. So there is enough and more money required to solve for very basic products. So better nutrition products, better plant protection products, animal nutrition, animal health, all of those things need more and more capital. The nature of the capital will be blended. There will be more grants, there will be more corporates coming in, and that's a great way actually where a lot of other CSR money could also plow in creative ways rather than just doing education or healthcare. But that's a separate argument. We'll talk about it later. And then you also have equity, which is to kind of follow through. In terms of what are open spaces, if you ask me, I think the whole agri waste to value space is very, very novel, it's very new, and hence it's very open. It is also not classic VC many a times because it has a lot of aggregation, it has a lot of working capital involved, but there is tremendous value that you can unlock from agri waste. Whether it's materials, novel materials, whether it's construction materials from agri waste, textiles, packaging materials, you name it. So that confluence of manufacturing and agri waste, even bioenergy for that matter, right? So policy, of course, is doing its bit, but I think there's tremendous value to be unlocked and hence money which can go in there. The other one is, of course, long tail R&D kind of project. They have a fantastic portfolio called TrimBio, again in the space, which is very deep science. We have a company in the material science space called Alten, which uses agri waste. So the point is, companies like these, which require a 3 to 5 year, maybe from a lab to pilot scale journey, those need to be underwritten as well, I would say.
Fantastic. I think lots of pointers you have raised. Maybe I'm going to come back to one of you to ask about that, how does it really catalyze into a larger change. But let me get to Baiju and switch the gears from impact financing to the CSR, and then I will try and see that how these two link up, particularly in the wake of that international aid is going down. So what these collectively can do. But Baiju, just coming to you, you said that you're the CSR lead for Bisleri. You've got multiple things under your wings. So, how have you seen that Bisleri CSR approach evolving beyond compliance to create a long-term, scalable social impact? So, if you can just help us understand, then we will start to link the dots, and I'll come back to my secondary questions so that we can find some semblance for the audience also to relate with the same.
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. Complaints, yeah. If any company is having a different thought of value, means different way of looking, then complaints is always a problem. In Bisleri, we are not spending 2%. We are about 12%. Why? Because we are not started the CSR in 2014. Our CSR is started in 2001, when government is also not even thought about there is a need of all the companies should have to take some kind of a social responsibility. So company always keep a huge lot of money to take care of the social commitment and work accordingly. And even anytime CSR says, again there is a Prime Minister fund is available if you need more. He is very interested. So sustainability or the social responsibility is there in our DNA. And the company is really giving a lot of importance to the social value what we are creating. Other than the branding, company should have, wherever Bisleri is available, we should have our own social footprints there. We are ensuring that. So in another way, if I am discussed, we are always with the government and we support the government platforms, government agencies. And the government came with EPR, 35%. We completed around 64 and pushed the government, why you are not thinking about 60? So when the government came to 60, we completed around 74, 75. And again pushed them, go to 75. So now company, we are what means a plastic positive company, means we don't have, we are doing more than 114%, 15%. Last year, this year our target is around 120. It's a huge lot of work. It's not a small work. So companies always try to help the CSR world to come into the real value making companies life, right? Even if you think about water credits we discussed, I think we are the only one company published the water credit book with all kind of equations that all the beverage companies can take it and use it and evaluate how much their water credits are. So now this is going to publish tomorrow. I think tomorrow is the day. CSR will be publicly sharing the copies in our online. So business always think about like that. Our Naimit project is started in 2001, and our Boards for Change program that we are doing with around 36 municipal corporations. And the last 1 year we collected more than 10,000 metric tons of plastics. Last year alone we collected under the CSR program, not in EPR. EPR we have a PROs to do. So where we are really expert, I want to give out the real things to everyone. The thing what I want to share is every CSR have their own expertise in some way. Our expertise belongs to water. It's about plastics, about ozone therapy that we use for our water filtration. So we are really interested to develop the real standards and the real values in that areas and help the community through that. So we don't think about complaints as a complaint. So we all think about the mandate as a mandate. This is also guidance given by the government to make your brand into a next level performance. I think I answered your question. Thank you.
Definitely, Baiju. Thank you very much. Now just let me turn back again to Shubhadeep. Shubhadeep, we talk about profitability, when we talk about triple bottom line, we talk about people, planet, profit, right? And now we've started another aspect, which is ESG. When you look from a venture capitalist point of view, what are the things beyond profitability, which you look at, which key impact metrics the investors should prioritize when evaluating their sustainable ventures to indicate the impact or transformation? I mean, business numbers everybody does. What are those intangible things which you want to prioritize from that standpoint, which will be useful?
So I think most impact funds by virtue will have something what we call as theory of change. Like what are the underlying stakeholders that you're trying to affect and how do you measure, monitor against those metrics, right? That's typically what we also do as a fund. So for example, when we talk about our agri-food work, there is of course India and there's smallholder farmers, so there is a reach to smallholders that we of course calculate. Then there is what we believe is when we look at farmholder profitability, that how much more money has gotten into the hands of the farmers as a result of the products and services of the portfolio companies that are associated with us, right? So again, tangible third-party evaluation done, every year or every alternate year to kind of come up with this report. On the resilience side, we kind of look at have we been able to provide loans, right? Have companies that work with us been able to provide loans to farmers, or have they made the value chains a little more resilient because of maybe insurance and stuff like that. On the sustainability side, there is of course reduction in agrochemical usage, there is reduction of water, there is kind of GHG emissions avoided, there is Gaurav mentioned about sustainable agriculture in the previous panel, so what kind of hectarage has come under sustainable ag. Things like, of course, jobs and all is easy to calculate, which I think everyone does, jobs and but the interesting thing and the opportunity there is, for example, ag employs a lot of women, right? In terms of that's the largest employer of, there's disproportionate representation. But how do we make it easier for the workforce to have more women as just beyond field also, right? Just beyond the field agriculture, how can there be better representation in manufacturing, right? That's where a lot of, let's say, the grants that we manage or the technical assistance that we manage as a fund is also rooted towards that. How do we make it easier for our companies to be able to think on those lenses? Some other metrics, and I'm kind of reading from my phone because I don't want to miss out, is that let's talk about environmentally hazardous products, right? So plastics, for example. So do our companies kind of help in reduce that or not, right? The number of rural households reached, the number of insurance dollar value covered, right? Loans dispersed, economic value created, food loss avoided, right? So the point is that every fund will basically have themes that they go after, and hence the ability for them to capture that into tangible metrics. And this also hasn't happened to us overnight. It's taken us 10 years since 2014 when we came out with our first homegrown impact report, which was done by some of my interns and us out of what we thought it could be. Now, of course, we're whatever's the best out there globally, we subscribe to that, whether it's IFC performance standards or what have you. But the point is that there is enough and more ways in which you can also measure non-financial impact. And I think it's incredibly useful because over time you can educate and nudge the companies that you work with around that. There is also, frankly, a very direct, selfish approach to it. It helps raise capital as well, right? So there is more and more responsible capital out there in terms of LPs who support us and who come into our companies as well later on, which are better suited if as a startup, as a founder, you kind of are ENS compliant, are doing your impact reporting. So there is also that incentive that you can get access to lower cost debt, for example, or you have equity partners. So it's not just for the love of what you should do. There's also, at the end of it, there is a financial advantage to doing all of the extra work as well, is what I would like to highlight.
No, I'm glad some of these terms were the music to the ears, theory of change, responsible capital. And I also recollect talking with you, you also talked about equity in terms of gender. Gender is centric to your work, probably you missed.
Yeah. No, I talked about it very briefly.
So I think some of these terms are basically, it would resonate with the development sector. Many of the not-for-profits who are working in this space, which looks particularly towards grants, and grants are not easy to come nowadays, and these are all coming with certain level of impacts. Now, talking of that, that impact financing basically is moving towards the development impact bonds, which basically talk about pay by results and so on. Those gaps are basically getting filled in by the impact of blended finance, so-called, which we say. So Shiva, just talking of that, what type of silver lining do you foresee? I mean, on one hand, Baiju is talking about the CSR investment being on the sides of a company. Similarly, both of you are representing venture capital, which basically talks of impact financing in some way or other, which both of you talked about. So what sort of silver lining do you foresee for the not-for-profit sector, who's also trying to be the harbinger of change on the ground, because they're the ones who are also delivering the impact on the ground? So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vikas, I think there's no denying we're in probably the most dynamic environment that there has been globally when it comes to pools of capital that we're looking at grants and how that is playing out last 3 months, and this is probably going to play out over the next several years. But one thing to be aware of is we are also riding a wave where India is becoming more central to the global story than we have really seen it ever be in our professional careers, and that has been a wave that I think will continue to pull some more incremental capital sources in. There is stronger kind of corporate focus on saying how do we actually support our ecosystems as well, including from traditional corporates saying, okay, this version of my business continues, but there is a next gen, whether it's a new technology that will come and radically revolutionize this, whether it is just setting myself up for how new industries are being set up. I need to have a focus on this, and for that, what else do I need to do? All of those are also triggering them to say, okay, for that, where do I need to set up? So for other donor agencies that haven't historically looked at India, they can start to come in. Domestic capital sources will also say, okay, if I'm trying to establish my field in other areas, it's not just about putting equity capital in those spaces, it is about saying, okay, this is an area I'm trying to learn, experiment in. Some of that capital will also come through from agencies, whether it's through their CSR buckets or not, to saying, I'm trying to learn about how these industries grow. I was with another friend who was looking at this from family offices saying, okay, we have been running these programs, how do we scale them up? How do we bring other people in? How do we showcase that we are actually best in class? So to a lot of the metrics that Subhadeep was also talking about, I think it is a question of just stepping in and incorporating, okay, of the different programs that are there. You called out to this 3.3 million trust foundations and non-profits that are here in the country. There is a volume of other competing capital sources. It is a question of saying, okay, for whatever I'm looking at as the outcomes, how do you think and position yourself as saying, I am the best, most effective way to clean water from this industrial source in these regions? Why is this method of my working, whether it's technology or not, the best way to actually solve that problem? It's a challenging period to be there, but I think if you can position yourself mentally from that focus, there's still capital sources trying to solve those problems, and it's how to position yourself to best tap into those. So it's definitely a very challenging environment. I don't want to dispute that at all, but those would be some of the areas I'd say to focus on, saying there are new capital sources coming in, there are lessons from this other part of the industry, from finance to take in, and take those in to think about how you can incorporate into your models.
Thanks, Shiva. I think definitely agree that India is becoming central to the global story as well, whether in terms of the population or the economy or in terms of the impact we hold here. There's no denial of that, and definitely there is a long way to go for us as well in terms of, bringing these financial solutions. Because banking is also one such revolution which India is bringing to the fore, while the global banking probably is evolving. Similarly, if you look at the microfinancing as well as a part of it, which is holding about 6 crore people, holding about a portfolio of about 3.5 lakh crores. It's a huge thing, and India at one point in time was at the forefront of the microfinance revolution. We had our own ups and dips, but eventually we've grown in that. So I think that plays a role. But now my last question, to being mindful of time, to Baiju is that, Baiju, you've been monitoring CSR for a long time. You invest on CSR, get the impact driven either through your own direct implementation or through your partners as well. In both the cases, what do you think is the biggest challenge companies face in terms of the impact assessment? And how can CSR programs be better measured for effectiveness so that it leads to more measurable impact on the ground rather than only the stories itself?
Yeah, social impact assessment is not that much easy to do in a short-term project. It's really tough. I think everyone know that. Especially the sustainable projects or eco projects, it's a slow science. It will take years. So if I'm saying about our means Nayumi, our water conservation projects. So we done more than 303 check dams in the hydro areas of India, Maharashtra and Gujarat. So I'll come to story. So in the villages, what we found that there are a lot of suicide incidents happens in the villages. So after the check dam, when we are started giving the water, the cropping system is changed. Before the check dams, they have only one-time crops, fully depending on the monsoons. So when the check dams and water are available, they got 3 times crops in every year. So the income increased, vegetation increased, cattle field increased, livestock increased, health increased. We have around 5 or 6 villages. The marriages happening in that villages after 10 to 14 years, just because the neighboring villages are not ready to send their daughters to that villages just because of the poverty. They don't have the food, enough food for. So how assessment or evaluation or monitoring of the projects, especially in the areas of social impact, takes a lot of time. So short-term projects is the biggest problem, or short-term vision or short-term investment will be the biggest killer of the real impact assessment.
I think really a wonderful point you made, that short-term investment, which is highly transactive. Most of the times, the organizations end up saying that, make this infrastructure or change this or change that. But looking at the long-term assessment of what changes in the life of the people where we are making this investment is something which we should really look for. So with that note, thank you gentlemen for your valuable contributions. Thank you for such a lovely audience. Of course, Samosa Samel and Chai held us apart. And of course, thanks to AndPurpose team and Kamna for organizing such a beautiful event. Hopefully, these events will become more over a period of time and will be able to talk and provide platform for transformation like that. Thank you and wish you all a good time.